Hey there everybody, I'm Joe the Disney Guy, and in our journey through Disney's animated features, we're about to enter a major transition in the animation department. So this seems as good a time as any to take a look at one of Disney's past generation of animators, the Nine Old Men. Today we're going to be taking a look at a very influential and, at times, controversial leader of the department, Wolfgang Reitherman. Wolfgang Reitherman, or Wooly as he would come to be known, was born on June 26, 1909 in Munich, Germany, but his family moved to Kansas City, Missouri when he was only 2 years old. Man, between Elby Works, Wolfgang Reitherman, and, Walt Disney among a few others, Kansas City, Missouri seems to be like the mecca of animators or something. Sure, it may not be as warm or as glamorous as Anaheim or Orlando, but hey, good for you, Kansas City. There must be something in your waters churning out these wildly creative, artistic people or something. Reitherman's family again moved to Sierra Madre, California in his teens, where he developed a fascination with two subjects, art and airplanes. Planes were Wooly's first love, though, leading him to attending Pasadena Junior College to study to become an aircraft engineer, eventually combining his two passions to become a draftsman for Douglas Aircraft. During his time at Pasadena Junior College, Reitherman would draw cartoons in his spare time, and eventually decided to enroll in the Chouinard Art Institute in 1931 to study watercolors. One of Reitherman's teachers, Don Graham, was brought on by the Disney Company to train their animators, and it was through him that Wooly first met Walt Disney. Impressed by Reitherman's sketches, Disney offered him a job at the company upon his graduation in 1933. But Wooly initially balked at the offer, turned off by the repetitive nature of animation. Walt insisted that Wooly at least try animation for a few weeks, and it was through this trial that Reitherman discovered his love for the motion of animation, and agreed to join the company full-time. What's funny about this dilemma and eventual realization that Wooly had is that it pretty much highlights all of the known pros and cons of animation. Yes, especially back in those days, the concept of drawing the same picture over and over and over and over again would seem mind-numbingly repetitive. But animation, unlike traditional art, does have the advantage of motion. And for somebody like Wolfgang Reitherman, who was so fascinated by motion and things like aircrafts, it's not hard to see why animation appealed to him so much. Reitherman's first assignment was on the 1934 short Funny Little Bunnies, which led to Wooly being used often on Silly Symphonies and eventually Mickey Mouse shorts, particularly working with the character of Goofy. Due to his inherent understanding of motion and his tirelessly hard-working nature, Reitherman moved quickly through the ranks at the Disney studio, eventually being named Goofy's lead animator in 1937 after his work on the short Clock Cleaners. Before we continue, I think this is a good time to address the work ethic that Wolfgang Reitherman had. It's been stated by numerous people that Wooly wasn't the most talented animator at the studio. He was great, of course, no doubt, but even though guys like Ollie Johnston and Milt Kahl were more talented than him from a technical aspect, nobody worked harder at that studio than Wolfgang Reitherman. And it's because of this hard work he was able to ascend through the ranks of the studio as quickly as he did. Just goes to show you that sometimes hard work truly does pay off. Reitherman was given an important yet difficult task for the studio's first full-length feature, utilizing folded paper to help animate the stoic magic mirror. And he also animated a sequence where the dwarves carved a bed for Snow White. Although the latter scene didn't make the final cut, Walt was impressed enough by it to give Wooly the difficult Monstro chase in Pinocchio, believing that he was one of the few animators who could figure out a way to animate the scene easily. Wooly continued his stretch of epic feature scenes with animating the iconic dinosaur fight in Fantasia. You'll begin to notice a trend in the scenes that were assigned to Wooly over the years to animate. If it involved big, action, or preferably both, almost always it ended up being Reitherman's assignment. Now why was this? Well, for one reason or another, Wolfgang Reitherman did have this innate understanding of large-scale objects and how to animate them. Possibly that's due to his background as an aeronautics architect. But even more importantly, he understood animation from a cinematic point of view. He always had this understanding as to where the camera should be, and he would stage his shots much like how you would stage a shot on a live film set. It was this ability that would also help him tremendously later in his career as a director. It wasn't always big action for Wooly, though, who was purposely assigned the charismatic Timothy Q. Mouse in Dumbo to give him a more subtle challenge. But after the bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1941, big action was exactly what Reitherman got, as he left the Disney studio to enlist in the United States Air Force. Reitherman served in the Air Force through World War II's conclusion, doing work in Africa, Asia, and the South Pacific, and by the time his service ended, Wooly had not only risen to the rank of Major, but was also awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, a medal given to award excellence in aerial operations. You know, it really says something about a guy who wasn't even born in the United States to leave a pretty comfortable job to go serve this country in a war. And he wasn't serving by just drawing propaganda cartoons, oh no, he was flying planes on the Eastern Front of the war. So while there may be people who disagree with his animation or management style, there's nobody who can disagree about the heroism that Wolfgang Reitherman showed. While deployed on a flight to the Philippines, Reitherman met an air stewardess, Janie Marie McMillan, who he would later marry in 1946. And when the couple became pregnant in 1947, they actually planned on moving to San Francisco, thus taking Wooly away from Disney for good. But while saying his goodbyes to his friends at the studio, Walt was able to convince Reitherman and his wife to settle down in Los Angeles and let Wooly come back to work at the studio. I'm telling you, man, Walt could sell ice to an Eskimo. How many stories have we heard now about Walt talking his way out of some potentially damaging situation? It's incredible. Reitherman picked up right where he left off at the studio, and even claimed to be the final push that convinced Walt to finally go back to creating full-length features with Cinderella. Wooly continued on numerous projects for the features over the years, including The White Rabbit, half of Captain Hook's animations, and the dogfight in Lady and the Tramp. But in 1957, Reitherman saw his role at the company shift dramatically when he was given his first opportunity to direct with the short The Truth About Mother Goose. Walt had always respected Reitherman's leadership skills and thought they would translate well to directing, especially with Walt stepping away from the animation department a bit to focus on other projects. Wooly's earliest breakout moment as a director was staging and directing the epic fight sequence at the end of Sleeping Beauty between Prince Philip and Maleficent. I always liked the way that Reitherman set up that scene. He said that during the creation of the scene they were always driving to kill the prince. Now, you and I know that Prince Philip was never going to die in that scene. But the audience didn't. And by setting the scene up in a way that looked like it was designed for the prince to fail, it led to even more exuberance and relief from the audience when Prince Philip did eventually triumph. Sometimes a little bit of psychology does go a long way in film. As the studio moved into the late 60s, the need for directors in the animation department began to grow significantly, with longtime director Wilfred Jackson retiring and Ham Lusky being transferred to television directing. Due to this deficit of directors, it was Reitherman who was given the major promotion, becoming the first animator to direct a full-length animated feature at the Disney Studio in 1963 with The Sword and the Stone. Reitherman would go on to direct every single animated feature all the way through The Rescuers in 1977. Upon Walt's death in 1966, Reitherman also took on a bigger leadership role at the studio, both as the primary producer of animated films and as the de facto head of the animation department. Now, this is where Reitherman's legacy does get a little bit convoluted and controversial. You see, not everybody at the studio was the biggest fan of Reitherman's directorial or leadership styles, and people like Ward Kimball and Milt Kahl feuded with him constantly about the direction that the department was taking, especially when it came to the use of things like recycled animation. Reitherman's style as a director and producer certainly had its pros and cons. On the one hand, Reitherman did have an innate ability to produce films both on time and on budget, something desperately needed in the wake of Walt's death. On the other hand, Reitherman preferred for his films to be safe, which led to a lot of the same voice actors and recycled animation, causing some critics to say that the movies in his era were unimaginative and lacked the heart of the Golden Age films. Reitherman was also very open and receptive to new ideas, both in terms of animation and the storytelling. But many claim that if he didn't understand the idea, instead of trying to figure it out, he would go with the safer route of shelving it. Here's my thing with Wolfgang Reitherman. A lot of people give him a lot of grief about being too safe, and while I understand where they're coming from, you have to understand the time period in which he was operating. The legendary Walt Disney had just passed away, and the future of not just a department, but the concept of animated feature films was in jeopardy. If Wooly had produced even one over-budget flop, who knows what would have happened to the medium? So, were Wolfgang Reitherman's films in the 60s and 70s safe? Yes. But were they what was necessary at the time for the medium to survive? I do think so. Reitherman would step down as director after The Rescuers, producing The Fox and the Hound in 1981 before finally stepping away entirely and retiring, after nearly 50 years of service to the Disney Company. Sadly, Reitherman passed away in 1985 at the age of 75 in a single-car accident near his home in Burbank, California. Reitherman would, however, be posthumously inducted as a Disney legend in 1989 with the other 9 old men. So now that we know all about Wolfgang Reitherman's career, the question becomes, what is his enduring legacy with the Disney Company? Quite simply, to me, Reitherman is the enduring example of hard work and problem solving that helped build the animation department up in the 1930s and 40s and kept it afloat in the 60s and 70s. Despite his critics, Reitherman was able to do something that no one ever wanted to do, and that's attempt to fill the lofty shoes of Walt Disney. And Reitherman even achieved an Academy Award for his work by directing Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day, which won for Best Animated Short in 1968. So at the end of the day, Wolfgang Reitherman will be forever remembered as one of the most influential leaders in Disney's history, and without a doubt is a Disney legend. Well guys, that wraps up for me this week. Hope you all enjoyed, and let me know what your thoughts are about Wolfgang Reitherman. Also, YouTube has completely changed how I do my end slate, so I think somewhere over here is a way to subscribe to this channel. And if you like this video, I think somewhere over here is where you can find another influential person video that you will probably enjoy as well. Also want to give a special shout out to Kay Radke and David Deister. Thank you guys so much for your generous contribution to my Patreon page. It has not gone unnoticed, and you guys are awesome. If you guys want to find out more about my Patreon page or follow me on Twitter, any of that good stuff, all of those links are in the description down below. You can check out the page for all sorts of cool goodies that you can get for being basically a VIP of this channel. Alright guys, that wraps it up for me, and I'll see you all real soon.
The bare necessities of life. Yeah, with just the bare necessities of life. Yeah, man.